Perfect. And otherwise, there's not really any rules to know, anything to know, other than we're just going to chat for 45 minutes to an hour and, see where the
Great.
conversation takes us.
Great. I'm
That
sure
sounds
it'll
good.
go in many directions knowing my brain. So,
Well, that's good. That's handy. I find it's like kind of mixed with people that like there's either like a moment of brain doesn't know where to go, so they end up talking about literally everything underneath the sun,
mm,
or brain shuts down because they're being asked questions, and
mm,
the right questions are always like uncomfortable.
I'll probably be more the former.
Welcome to the podcast, Caitlin.
Hello.
Uh, I'm going to do the awkward thing, which is nice and awkward, and just ask, who are you?
So I'm Cooklin. That's my artist name. My real name is Caitlin Cook. The Cooklin is, if you couldn't already tell, the it's two of the syllables of my full name, just kind of put together. Um, because I think it's funny.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm a cartoonist primarily, but I'm also just a writer and a journalist part of the time. Um, I live in Vancouver, Washington, which is right outside of Portland, Oregon. And yeah, I guess I make comics about mainly nonfiction subjects. I do a lot of memoir stuff. But I've done a bit of graphic journalism, which is essentially just journalism done in comic form. Um, and yeah, that's pretty much it. I haven't really done any fiction, although I am not, the door is not closed to that possibility in the future. Um, and yeah, that's about what I do. Yeah.
It's a pretty solid like elevator pitch of
You
yourself. I
think
can't even
so?
do that. Yeah, like I can't do that for me. When people ask me what I do, my brain goes, "I do nothing," and
Mm.
which is just a straight up lie. And
Yeah, you
so
do a
I
podcast.
do podcasts, I do drawings, I do all kinds of stuff. I got stuff behind me which is hidden but not hidden because it's in plain sight. It's all
hmm
kinds of things. But yeah, I feel like that's a pretty solid pitch. So your journalism stuff is written stuff, video stuff. What kind of is it?
So it's a little mixed because okay, so I'll backtrack a little bit. So
Sure.
I got a film degree in 2019. That's when I graduated from film school. But my film education was very fiction based. And it wasn't until around halfway through my degree that I realized that nonfiction is kind of more what I want to do. I'm a creative person, but I don't have much of an imagination. So it's actually quite hard for me to come up with like original stories. Again, like I said, it's not really off the table. Like I do have a few ideas, but it's basically it's extraordinarily rare for me to come up with a fiction story that I think works. But real stories are right there. And I can take a real story, find out everything I can about it, and find a way to tell it in a compelling way. I find that a lot more natural. So I got a master's degree in journalism after I got my film degree and had a very hard time finding work, mainly because I wasn't feeling it anymore. And all of the people interviewing me for jobs were like, we can tell that you don't want to do this. So I got a journalism degree. Just so like, I mean, my main goal with it was like, this is nonfiction storytelling is something that feels very natural to me. And I also want a job. So that isn't being a barista in Encino, California, where everyone is rude. Because that was
The
where my
dream
life
job.
was. Oh my God, that was where my life was in like 2019. I graduated in 2019 and then I worked at this cafe for 6 months and then the pandemic happened. But I was at
Good
this
timing.
cat. Yeah, but honestly though, it was great for me because I didn't have to. They furloughed me. I didn't have to go there ever again. It was awesome. So I wasn't really complaining. No, but I was serving coffee to people in Encino, California, and they were just so mean. They were so mean there. I did get to meet Victoria Justice though, which was cool. But she got to see me having a meltdown, so that wasn't so cool. Anyway. So I'm getting super off track here, but basically, I that job like didn't even cover my rent, like it was pathetic, and so I just really wanted a job. So I got my master's in journalism, And while I was getting my master's in journalism, I was getting skills in like print journalism, digital journalism, and broadcast journalism. That was I was trying to get as much out of it as I could, even though when you get a master's degree, you're kind of doing a lot of like academic-y stuff. I was doing that too, obviously, but I was like really trying to take as many classes as I could so I could build the skills that I didn't get from getting a film degree. Anyway, so while I was doing my academic-y stuff, a thesis and such, I discovered that comics journalism is a thing. So I ended up making my entire thesis about comics journalism, and I did a project called that I called Anacomics, and ANHE Comics, which is a portmanteau of anhedonia, which is basically the state of not being able to feel like any kind of pleasure, so depression, basically, and comics. And so it was a graphic journalism project where I interviewed people anonymously about their experiences with clinical depression, and then I turned those stories into comics. So that was like kind of where the graphic journalism side of it began. And that's kind of the only so far graphic journalism that I've done, although I have big plans for other graphic journalism projects in the future. Um, that's not something you can get a job placement with, right? So I did an internship in like print journalism. I did like tech writing. I wrote about like tech startups in the Los Angeles area, which was very interesting, actually, way more interesting than it sounds. Um, and then after grad school, I got a job at a TV news station in Portland. And so I did that. I was an assignment editor, which people don't know what that means. But an assignment editor is basically in a newsroom. There has to be someone who is kind of the information hub. And so assignment editors take in tips, they answer the tip line, they look at the tip email, they take in press releases, they funnel out what's important to the rest of the newsroom, and then they discard things that are just like bullshit, because a lot of it is just bullshit. Um, and then they also are responsible for making decisions as to like who who gets assigned like what stories. So if I like heard something crazy happening on like a police scanner, I would be like, hey, we have a photographer who's not doing anything right now. Let's have them like go out and shoot that. So I was the one primarily responsible for that. So it's and so also I was like fact checking and doing all sorts of like little tasks. So it was like real journalism, but I also like didn't have to answer to the public, so it was like kind of nice. So yeah, like it's a very difficult job because sometimes multiple things are happening at once and you have to make a lot of decisions, and sometimes those are very hard decisions. But I really enjoyed it. Like no one wants to do that job. It's seen as like the worst job in the newsroom and the hardest job in the newsroom, but I actually really quite enjoyed it. And so I left that job a couple of years ago, so that I could work on my comics primarily, because I had enough in savings to justify that. And I was like, let me just give it like a couple years and just see where it goes. And I can talk a little bit more about where that went. But to answer your question about journalism, I actually ended up, I finished a big project, which we'll talk about. But now that the project's finished, I'm going back into journalism, and I'm doing the same job I was doing before, but at a different news station. So I'm going to be starting that up here soon. So you've got me right in this transitionary period. So
You're in the perfect
yeah,
period. That's great. Yeah.
yeah,
I think that's the first time I've heard anyone be like, I need a job. I think journalism's the thriving area to go into because I feel like
I
most people are like,
know.
journalism's dead. Like it's a
I
dying industry.
know. Yeah, it is, but also like I mean actually I wouldn't say that it is a dying industry. I think it's that's a dramatic way to put it. I don't think it is what it used to be, but I mean, I don't know. It's exciting. It's fun. People are always going to need information. I don't think journalism will ever be dead in that sense, even if it isn't what it used to be, I guess, because it's changing. I mean, I happen to know that the station that I'm going to be starting at is doing a big pivot to streaming, and in maybe a decade, like TV journalism won't really be a thing anymore. That's kind of a prediction that I'm going to put out there. It seems to be all about streaming because we don't really do cable TV anymore. We're always on our phones, and streaming might be the way to actually get your newscasts now. So I think we're going to see a big sea change here in a bit. bit when it comes to that. And so I'm re-entering the scene right as we're getting to that. So yeah, I mean, to say it's dying, I think would be inaccurate. I think it's a constantly changing, especially in the last like decade, as like physical newspapers aren't really much of a thing anymore. You have to get your online subscriptions to those websites, things like that. So yeah, it's just not what it used to be. That's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just kind of what happens as time goes on. So
Time and change. Those things are inevitable in every industry, I
yes.
think. Yeah, that's the
Yeah,
natural thing.
totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
I mean, even as a like a film student, like I think I know when I was because so I studied for context, I studied contemporary lens media, which was like a combination photography film degree,
Mm,
which is as I was coming up through, digital cameras were becoming the thing. They were
hmm.
becoming the main shooting tool, and yeah, we were studying film. We were still studying film photography, and then coming out of that degree, everyone was like, "Well, yeah, you need to know digital now." I'm like, oh, great, my my degree is
That's an
worthless. Thanks.
interesting degree. Did you do that in the UK?
Yeah, I did it. I did it back in the UK. This was 15 years ago or so now.
Wow.
But it was very much it was a degree which was meant to be somewhere between media production and fine art. So it didn't teach you anything in any capacity, which was useful because it was like you
Mm,
didn't learn TV production, you didn't learn film production, but you learned how to use a camera.
mm.
And then it didn't teach you project planning, but it taught you how to do essays on films. So
Yeah.
it was somewhat useful, I'll say. There's transferable skills in it, which I've used, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
one of those oddities. But it's the truth of the industry. But back to the point. Um, so obviously, I found you, as you mentioned, through your comics, which
Mhm.
is how I discovered your lovely work in the vapid space, which is social media.
Yes.
You mentioned you discovered journalism comics, but had you been drawing before that? Like,
Yeah, I mean, kind of. It was so comics was like an active interest for me when I was probably between the ages of 6 and like 14, I would say. Um, and when I say active interest, it's kind of weird because I wouldn't say that I had any level of like I was not cultured when it came to comics. So I'll just kind of overview like what my relationship with comics was in my like early to adolescent years. So when I was like 6, I really discovered that I liked comics because my dad would like bring home the Sunday paper and I would fish out the Sunday funnies and I was always really into them. I would just devour it. And I don't really know what it was about them that made me love them so much. I think I just felt some sort of cosmic connection, I don't know, with telling stories through illustrations in that particular context, with, panels and speech bubbles and, the pacing that panels give you, that kind of thing. I don't know, I just really connected with it. I liked Garfield, I liked Peanuts, I liked Dennis the Menace, Family Circus, all those comics. And I would draw my own comics. And one of my first like dreams that I remember having was having my own comic strip in the newspaper. I had this like dumb little comic strip where I like every character was just like a ball with a face on it. Um, and like I don't know if I even had any like specific characters. I would just like draw little balls with faces on them and like have them have conversations or something. I don't even know. But yeah, that was a big interest of mine when I was really little. And then like around like the age of 8, I got really into manga. My older sister is very into manga. Or I mean, she very much was back then. I don't know if she's been that into it in like recent years, but very much so when we were growing. She's like 8 years older than me, so I got the benefit of kind of having that. I don't feel like I identify with Gen Z that much, even though I am Gen Z. I'm 28 years old. Because my only sibling is very like right in there with the millennials. So, I got a lot of my culturedness from her, right? So anyway, but she got me kind of into it, even though we were not at all into the same manga series. She was into a lot of these like I forget what the word is, but there's like a Japanese word for manga that primarily appeals to girls and women. I was into shonen mangas, which is like mangas that appeal to young boys. Like I was primarily into shonen mangas, so like little action ones, things like that. And so I consumed a lot of manga between the ages of like 8 and 10. And then when I was 10, I looked around and I realized, oh man, I'm a weeb and everyone thinks I'm weird. So I should probably put the manga on the back burner for a little bit and try to be a normal kid who actually listens to like the radio and like knows English language songs and not just like the theme songs to all my favorite anime. Because there was a time when I was like 8 to 10, I just like I only listened to Japanese songs that were like featured in anime. That was all I listened to. I didn't like I was missing out on like Rihanna and all that stuff. And so I was like, okay, I need to be a normal American child for for a while. And so I did that, and but I still doodled in class. I was always doodling like anthropomorphic animals. I created like this network of trading cards with my friends using index cards. We would just like draw little like anthropomorphic animals and like trade them with each other. When I was in middle school, I created like a bunch of different little comic strips. With just like the most bizarre like characters. It was so goofy, and all the adults in my life were obsessed with my little comics. So they really loved them. In fact, they have been those specific adults that were in my life at the time. I'm still in contact with them, and they're so thrilled that I'm doing comics as my like primary art form now because they're like, oh my God, I remember the little comics that you drew when you were in middle school. But then I didn't really, once I got into high school, I didn't really do anything comics related. I became really into the idea of becoming a filmmaker. So storytelling still, but I think I just kind of wavered a little bit. And so yeah, I didn't really rediscover it until I was in grad school, and I was in grad school and I was feeling kind of depressed. And I read there's this book. No one knows it for some reason. Back in like Back in like 2017 Twitter, there was a guy on Twitter who was really popular, who went by Jomny Sun. I don't know if you know who I'm talking about. His real name's Johnny Sun, but he just like he had this like Twitter persona where he would like write these cute little tweets, and they were always like intentionally misspelled. And his little persona was like this cartoon alien, and it was a great Twitter account. It does not exist anymore. He doesn't do any of that anymore. He just does stuff under his like real name and real face. But he was able to capitalize off of that and create a book, and the book was called and it's all spelled incorrectly, but it's basically called Everyone's an Alien When You're an Alien Too. Um, Heavily recommend looking it up. It's excellent. It's truly excellent. Anyway, I like reread it because I was depressed, and it's a great book to read when you're depressed. And it's an illustrated book, and I was like, I would love to make something that is this like impactful, this just great. And so I just told myself like maybe my thesis project should be something related to that. And that's what led me to discover that indeed people do journalism, because I had to do it in a journalism way, like, in
Of
order
course.
to
Yeah.
for it to be my thesis for my journalism degree. So that's how I like made it fit. And most of the time when you like try to make things fit, it's not a good idea, but in this case it was a very good idea. It worked out very well for me. So that's kind of yeah, that's kind of my journey with comics before all the way up until I it just stuck for real this time. So
That's very good. That's interesting as well because I think when I discovered your stuff, it did give me it gave me the Sunday comics vibe because
mm,
it was
which
very like pithy.
which ones did you discover? I don't even know.
Uh, I can't quite remember initially, but it was definitely like the asexuality stuff which you
Mm.
posted, and then I kind of dove in from there. I was like, well, this is funny, and this is great. This is just like really entertaining. And what I really got into was just the style choice you've chosen
Mm.
was so direct and so graphic that I was looking at like this is unique in terms of like other kind of online comics or different kinds of this. Like it was just very straightforward. I was like, I love that. It's everything which I needed. But it reminded me of like Sunday Funnies because they were short form and often quite simple. in their style rather than
Hmm.
like heavily shaded or anything like that because they couldn't really afford the time to be. So I
Hmm.
got the vibe from it, which was interesting that you initially had that interest.
And it's so interesting. I don't hear a
Mm.
lot of people like talk about my work like that very often because I don't know. I at least not lately, like for the past year. So like I mentioned earlier, I just closed on a big project and
Mm-hmm.
so I've just been kind of I've been a little isolated for the past year because I haven't been doing any shows. I've just been like working on the project and so yeah, I don't hear a lot of like I guess I hear feedback, but like not what I just heard from you, basically. So it's always interesting to hear stuff like that. Yeah, and I guess I'll talk about my little project now because
Yeah.
anyone listening is probably like, "What's the big project that she's talking about?" So yeah, and this is actually a great segue because you just mentioned the asexual comics. So
Yeah.
yeah, the asexual comics. So I realized I was asexual around the time I started like really diving into comics for my thesis. It was a very transformative period of my life, late 2021. And I because those things happen around the same time, because I was returning to comics after not drawing them for a long time, and I hadn't really done a lot of drawing in the past few years, and so I was like, I need to practice. And so when you realize something like you're asexual, and by the way, I guess for anyone who doesn't know, asexuality essentially means that you don't really experience sexual attraction to anybody. And I to be completely honest, I don't love that definition because sexual attraction is such a nebulous concept that that definition leaves a lot of room for more questions. And so, one definition of it that I like is that you don't have an internal need for partnered sex. I think that that's a really good way to put it. I think that's it's less. I think yeah, it creates fewer questions, I would say, than defining it based on sexual attraction. And I've read some like asexual thinkers who think this way too. But anyway, so yeah, like it's just not something that is important to me or like really ever would ever cross my mind if it didn't have to, because we live in a society.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it just doesn't it anyway, I could go on and on about that, but so I realized this about myself when I was about to start with this comic stuff. So when you realize you're asexual, you start to like look back on your life and you start to realize, okay, wait, that was an indicator. That was an indicator. Why didn't I realize this earlier? Because all of this other stuff was happening. And so I just like kept on thinking about these moments. One of my favorite ones to cite, if I can give an example, is uh people used to tell me like if you really have to pee and you can't pee for whatever reason, like you're not in a place where you can pee, you should think about sex and that'll make your desire to pee stop. And that never made sense to me because um both of those things involve like your genitals, and like if I'm thinking about my genitals while I'm trying not to think about my genitals, you know what I mean? Like that sort
Yeah.
of thing. Because I think it probably works for people because it's like a sensation that like consumes your body, but that's not how it works for me.
It's
So
distracting for most people.
yeah,
Yeah.
and it
Yeah.
does the opposite for me because it's like it's all it's the same area of my body.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's like that doesn't
It's all same
help.
destination. It doesn't matter. Like,
Yeah, it's like
yeah.
that never made sense to me, but everyone else was like, "Oh yeah, that helped. Thanks."
Yeah.
Like that, what a great
Yeah.
life hack. I'm like, "No, it's not. You're weird." Um, anyway, so that's like a good example of like
Mm.
indicators of that. When I look back, I'm like, "Oh my God,
Yeah.
now that makes sense." So I was like, "Well, let me just start making some comic strips about that to get some practice in." So I started out with like a collection of 5 of them, and I started posting them on Reddit, and people were into them. Um, and then I just kind of put that on the back burner for a little while, until like I was done with my degree and was just kind of doing other stuff. And then I was like, maybe I should make a zine, where I just make more of these comics and I just put it together into one zine. And truly, 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 I did that. And well, when I did it, I had it. what I had in mind was just like just another zine to add to my table of zines
Mm.
when I go to like comic fairs because everything else I was doing was related to Anacomics. And Anacomics does fine, but I think people when they come up to my table at like zine fairs, they're not super stoked about it because it's like, well, I came here to have a good time, not to think about depression. So it has its purpose, but maybe not. Yeah, it's not going to be
It's
as
not the
successful, I
forerunner for
think.
fun. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So I was like, well, I should just make another zine, like something that
Mhm.
isn't related to this project. So just to diversify my table a little bit. But turns out that zine is exactly what people want. It's exactly what the people wanted. People were very, very into it.
Yeah.
And I just I didn't expect that to happen because my work with Anacomics is more like it's a little bit, I guess I would say it's more sophisticated than my comic strips about asexuality. My asexual comic strips are just they're very simple, and maybe that's exactly what makes them so great, honestly. But because they're so simple, I naturally see them as less sophisticated than my more like in-depth work. So I guess I was surprised when it just became very quickly just the best selling thing that I did. Um, people were I would often sell out of it at these shows. Like people just really were it would be what would draw people to my table. They would see the word asexual on the cover of the zine because the zine was called Asexual Things I Did Before Realizing I Was Asexual. And people would see that word on the zine and that's what would draw them to my table. Like
Yeah.
even people who weren't asexual, they would be like, well, I have an asexual friend and I want to get this for them. Or I just am generally interested in this because I'm not asexual and I would like to understand this more, that kind of thing. So yeah, it's something that people are really interested in hearing about.
Cool.
So I was just like, all right, cool. I mean, I don't want this to be my whole thing because it's really personal.
Yeah.
But I will do as much as I need to for, I don't know, the representation that needs to happen to happen.
Yeah.
So I basically my this zine ended up being the catalyst for my first book deal. Um, my first full-length book deal. I have like two book deals actually. I have a book deal with Microcosm Publishing. So if you want my asexual comics, you can buy them through Microcosm Publishing. But I also signed a full-length book deal with Street Noise Books, which is based in Brooklyn, New York.
Mm.
I signed that in July, and I actually just turned in the final pages. I might have to make some changes. I don't know at the moment, but it's basically done. So yeah, it's so
It's
the book
crazy.
is called, I know. It's really wild to think that this just the zine that I didn't think was going to be that big of a deal. I literally just did it so I could have something to do and to make
Yeah.
my table more interesting. It led to like what I wanted. Like what I
Mm.
wanted was a book deal.
Yeah.
That's as I set out on this comics journey, that's what I wanted. I wanted, you know, there's so many. I'm looking at them right now. I'm looking at my comics bookshelf. There are so many full length graphic novels, nonfiction ones especially, that I just really admire and love. And I that's what I wanted. I wanted to make something like that. So
Mm.
it's crazy that's how it worked out and that it happened so quickly. I didn't really anticipate getting a book deal until I was at least 30 and I'm 28 now. So I got there just in time. Anyway, so the book itself, it's called Ace of Hearts. Lessons in Love from an Asexual Girl. And it's about my life. It's about like my love life and my evolving perceptions of love from the ages of like 8 to like 25 through an asexual lens. Now, of course, I wouldn't realize I was asexual until like near the end of the book, but most of the book is me flailing around, being confused as to why I was like experiencing things differently, and yeah, this whole thing not coming as naturally to me as it was for everyone else. And I'm really proud of it. I think it fills in a gap in the asexual representation zeitgeist.
Mm.
A couple of them actually. I think it it addresses the gap of well, okay, I think it discusses how asexuality and love can kind of work together and how they don't necessarily have to be at odds with each other. Even though if you go by the cultural script, they're very much at odds with each other.
Sure.
Um, and it really addresses that the discord that seems to exist between those two things, but doesn't necessarily have to exist. And yeah, I call it lessons in love from an asexual girl because it is just filled with the different things I learned about love over time. And some of those things were falsehoods and some of those things were truth. And me just coming to my own truth about love, not in spite of my asexuality, but because of my asexuality. And the other thing that it addresses that I haven't really seen addressed in asexual literature is the intersection of being asexual and also experiencing childhood sexual abuse. A lot of people like when you say that you are both of those things, they just say, well, you must not be asexual because clearly you must have like mental problems because of what happened to you. Um,
Yeah.
and uh, and that's what I thought for a long time. I thought that what was happening was because of what I'd experienced when I was a kid. But over time, it when I added the asexual perspective to the conversation, it made way more sense than anything else. Yeah, it's a conversation about asexuality that I think people are afraid to have because
Mm.
it is so fraught, understandably so. But I hope that it can really, I think we're ready for that conversation. I think for a while talking about asexuality, we weren't really ready for that conversation because people couldn't even grasp what asexuality was in the first place. But I think we're at a point now where we're ready to talk about that side of it. And so I hope that this book can kind of bring that conversation to people's heads and help it make more sense to people inside and outside of those experiences. So, yeah, I'm really proud of it. I think it's pretty good, and I hope other people do too. I'm not sure right now. The official publication date is February, but that actually might change. We might actually push it up. But
Mm.
as of now, February 2026, it shouldn't come out any later than that for sure. So,
Sure. Definitely for sure. I mean, if it does come out earlier, then people can get it earlier, and that's great. But if
yes,
not, then February.
exactly.
Yeah. But no,
Exactly.
that sounds fascinating. I mean, so to kind of track back a little bit, like I found your initial work through your asexual comics, and then discovered all your other comics, and was like,
Hmm.
oh, this is fantastic. This is all the stuff which it's the stuff when I go to zine fairs where, like you say, it's interesting to see which topics flourish and which topics
Mm.
don't, and
Hmm.
what people like navigate towards. And I find it really interesting of how you describe things just then, and how you approached kind of tabling at a zine fair, of where you're just like, oh yeah, logically, I need something for this space, and this makes sense to like go through that, and then you're kind of like analyzing things as you go. And I kind of get that vibe from your comics anyway, but you kind of analyze things as you go, and this makes sense. And like you just said, there's a gap in the zeitgeist for plugging in this, so this makes sense to kind of approach it from that way, rather than looking at it from a point of view of, well, this is my pure passion. When in reality,
Hmm.
the pure passion is the fact that you want to create something in a book deal, etc., or whatever. That might not be the passion, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah. Yeah, it almost comes off as like I have a market mindset or something, but I really
Ah,
don't. I think it's more just I don't know. Maybe it's more me being a people pleaser than anything else because I am a people pleaser. That's one of my issues, actually. Major people pleaser. Um, no, but I mean, I guess it's kind of all part of my grand plan, right? Because
mhm.
sometimes you got to give the people what they want before you got to give the people what they want so that they can get to know you and pay attention to you. And then once they know you, like that's when you can start putting out the less commercial work, I suppose. Um, so yeah, I have other work that I plan on doing after this book makes the rounds, and it's definitely less like the ideas are probably less commercial than like the asexual book. But hopefully by the time it's time to release those works, I will have people who really liked the asexual book and would like to hear more from me. Because the thing is, I guess what it comes down to is people really like reading memoir more than they
Mm,
like reading like heavily researched nonfiction. And I would say, I mean, I enjoy writing memoir, partially because it's easy. I mean, it's really
mm.
easy to write memoir. I mean, not that's a blanket statement, but I feel like it comes more
Easy for
naturally because
you.
it's I mean, yeah, it comes more naturally because it's coming from your brain and there's you don't
Sure.
have to do like any you don't have to dig up any like resources to be able to do research like you would with another kind of I mean, yeah, anyway, but I think people just like connecting with other people. And memoir is a way to do that. And the work that I would like to do going forward revolves a lot more around like finding experts to talk to and reading academic articles and things like that. These heavily researched topics, and so hopefully, I mean, I also am choosing topics that I think have a very personal slant too.
Mm.
They're at the end of the day, they're about people, so maybe it's not quite as uncommercial as I'm making it out to be. But yeah, basically what I'm saying though is like you got to give the people what they want and then they'll pay attention when I start talking about the things that are like less eye-catching, I suppose. So, yeah.
It's like a creative bait and switch. I think it's
Mm-hmm.
something which like creatives deal with a lot of the time. There's a kind of a couple of points you made where I was just thinking of like I feel like this is a very common this conversation, like you saying that kind of you asexuality stuff to your brain seemed very simple, right? It seemed very
Mm,
surface level, seemed like straightforward because it's
mm,
like slice of life, whatever. But the stuff which really inspires you is deeper, technical, a layer beneath. And I think, I mean, something which even I kind of think of when I do my stuff. Of I look at something and I'm like, this is stupidly obvious, right? I've made
mm,
something stupidly obvious, and therefore I can't release it because
mm,
I feel bad about it in a way, even though it's like you say, what the people want, what they enjoy, what engages them, gets them in to talk to you, and then you go, oh, by the way, also I make all this weird stuff. You can check out this
mm-hmm.
stuff, and I think that's common. I think that's it's like a good I don't know. It's a good problem to have if you can do both in a way.
Yeah, I suppose. And it's funny that you mentioned like the comics that inspire me because if I'm honest, like a lot of the comics that inspire me are memoir based.
Mm.
And some of them aren't. Like one book that I really, really adore is Persepolis. And that's a memoir, obviously. And I actually find Persepolis very inspiring because not only is it memoir, but it's very, very simply drawn memoir. And that's kind of my jam. Like I really like simply drawn comics because I think there's a lot of storytelling power in the very simply drawn comic that isn't quite present in the more complicated art styles. But I also like Box Brown. Do you know who Box Brown is?
Yeah, not Box Brand.
He's um he's a cartoonist who a lot of his work is about like legalizing weed, which isn't really a subject that I'm interested in. I'm not really a weed person. But he's done a lot of books where he does just like straight research about various interesting topics, and then he does like I'm looking at a couple of his books right now. I have a copy of his book Tetris, which is just about Tetris, like the history of Tetris, and it's super interesting. It's like
So,
it's a great read. But then also uh I think he has a book about like Andre the Giant, I want to say.
mm,
Hopefully I'm not getting that wrong. But yeah, he just does like straight research and just like regurgitates the research through comics. Like so I don't know, I guess my inspiration does go both ways for sure. Yeah.
see that, and I think it's interesting as well. Like, I think I've seen more and more recently, like the trend online, at least being of when you want to present something which is technical or complex, of no, I was going to use the word gussying it up, but essentially giving like a shimmer layer to everything which is being presented to the public, so they don't instantly click away. Because, like you say, like if someone's presented with like a text screen, the brain kind of shuts off for a lot of people. Of like, oh, great, I'm going to have to read this
Hmm.
3 page article about whatever's happening somewhere at some point, and then whereas if they're given something they can visibly engage with, it's a lot easier to get that message across. And I recently saw I went down a weird TikTok hole. We recently saw a video of a guy who instantly started shouting at the camera in like a kind of like an engaging and fun way, and then 2 seconds later went into Shakespeare. I was just reciting Shakespeare for the rest of this. Like, yeah, I'm just going to read you Hamlet now. I'm going to break this down. And I was like, we've gotten to this weird point where we are literally showing off the base, showing off that we're having to present something else to get your attention, and then presenting you with other things. The space we're in. I don't know how I feel about
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's what the algorithm does, right? The attention economy. I mean, I could say so much about that. I'm becoming so radicalized lately against like social media, even though I'm always on it and I'm always using it and I kind of have to use it.
It's a
But
necessity
like
of, yeah.
yeah, I mean, I'm not really saying any original thoughts right now, but I've become very okay, so I recently started a journey of I've recently started an academia journey. And part of that has been I taught my first comics class recently, and I'm just kind of getting some teaching experience because I am opening myself up to the possibility of like getting a PhD one day and maybe entering higher education after I've done like journalism for a while. But that's something that isn't necessarily a goal of mine. It's just something I'm keeping the door open to in case like because it does interest me. But anyway, part of that was like, okay, well, I've got to make sure that I'm like a real expert in communication theory then because I would have to like get that would be what I would get my PhD in would be communications. So I started with one of the most foundational communications texts, which is Amusing Ourselves to Death by Neil Postman. I don't know if you know that book.
No, no.
It was written in the 80s, and it's very depressing to read right now. It's very depressing to read right now. And yeah, I mean, his ideas can be a little controversial, but I think overall, like, it is seen as like a brilliant work of communications theory. Um, and essentially, like, what it really, because basically the book is about how the age of television is like destroying our literacy and our attention spans and things like that. And so this was written for like about television, because television was like entertainment television, and the news cycle was like getting, you know, big during that time. Um, and enough time had passed with television for there to be some observations about how it had like affected our brains. Um, and let me tell you, if Neil Postman was alive today, he would be so angry at humanity. But he would also be like, see, I was right. Because I think, I don't think the effects of television are like any match for the effects of social media on our attention spans and literacy. And so I have a constant moral conflict when it comes to social media about how I should be posting my stuff on social media, but I should also do it in a way where I can get attention, but also if I'm being that person on social media being like, pay attention to me, aren't I part of the problem? You know? So it's just this constant moral injury that I experience when it comes to social media.
Definitely, yeah, and I think as well, like you're saying, I mean, everyone obviously had the TV panic back in the day, and this is
Hmm.
the very real reality now of people's behavior being changed due to online media. And I end up in that constant conflict of brain thought where I'm like, okay, people are being changed and they're consuming things in different ways and it's making us less literate and our attention spans are shortening. But at the same time, every so often I see someone from the younger generation who can learn something insanely complex in such a short time because they've gotten so used to consuming mass amounts of media
Hmm.
that I'm sat going, we're in this weird space where we're almost breeding super learners, but they're kind of
Hmm.
covert super learners because they have all the knowledge. They just have no idea how to apply it because they haven't got the expansion plan to see a project through to the end.
Yeah, I think my one pushback on that would be, um, so so like to talk about the Neil Postman book again, it's called Amusing Ourselves to Death because it's um the attention economy really relies on what interests us. And so I think I don't doubt that we have young people who are capable of learning things really quickly because they are able to juggle things so much, but at the same time, they're only probably learning things that are interesting or like naturally interesting to them. But the things that we should know as humans are not always going to be interesting to us. You know what I mean? Like I didn't like math growing up, but and like most of the more complicated math we learn in math class is not useful at all to us as adults. But I cook stuff, you know. I need to know my fractions so that I know how much baking powder to put in my brownies, you know. So and I didn't enjoy learning all that stuff, but guess what? I had to learn it because and now I can make brownies, you know. Which is such a bad example, but you know what I'm saying.
No,
I mean,
it's
even with art, like when I'm trying to figure out how big my canvas should be when I'm on Procreate, like I have to do a little bit of fraction math, you know, to figure out what will fit on the page that I'm trying to put it on, you know, that kind of thing. That stuff will happen. Um, yeah, like geometry is actually pretty useful for artists, but it's not fun for most artists to learn because most artists are very right-brained and like numbers are not great for us. Um, yeah, so I actually do see that as a very interesting point though, like us maybe we're actually experiencing a growing pain where maybe collectively as a society we'll just get better at juggling multiple pieces of information at once. But I guess when it's all relying on things that are supposed to interest us and are kind of like low effort to begin with, that's where I start to see the cracks form in that idea. But yeah.
there's definitely like there's another layer. Obviously, there's the another layer which is very more like antagonist activist level where you're like, well, yeah, all of this is great, but it also depends highly on what we're pushed as a society, right?
Mhm,
Depending on the society you're in, depends on the material you get sent to you, depends on what the algorithm feeds you, and therefore
mhm.
could actively make you a great learner, but only for very specific topics and theories and ideologies, and that's a much scarier thought.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that too. That too. Yeah. So a lot of big
Real
feelings
upbeat
about
end to
that.
the podcast.
Yeah, lot of big feelings about that, but what can I do about it? I mean, the only thing that I've thought of that I would like to do about it is because I really care about literacy. I think it is very important as a people that we protect our literacy, and so I actually have been thinking about like doing something with like the local literacy groups. Because when I was at my former station, I actually did a story about a literacy nonprofit, and that like when I read about particularly in the PNW, Oregon and Washington, child literacy rates are like bad. Um, and it was already bad before the pandemic, but it's even worse now. And so I feel like I have some sort of obligation to like try to help. And so I don't know if this means that I will like be one of those people who goes into schools and like helps children who are struggling to read learn to read, or if it just means like donating some money to them. But like I want to do something for sure because I don't know. I just there's so much I could say about it, but we really do not benefit from being like a collectively stupid society. I mean, we've seen this, and part of not being stupid is knowing how to comprehend the things that we're reading. And we're not doing a great job of that. Even adults are not doing a great job of that. So yeah, just it's something I've been thinking about a lot lately.
I see that. It's interesting as well. Like, I mean, we didn't call out like a specific topic for this podcast, though you did send me a list of topics, which
I
I
did,
read,
yes.
and I'm very, very interested. But it's one of those things where I feel like we've kind of like covered the gamut of being an artist in a modern age, right? Being an artist
Mm,
in a modern age, but also the very conflict of art versus like analytical, technological
mm,
experience is like it's ever growing. It's something which like previous artists never really had to deal with up until like the 70s and 80s, where technology kicked in and went, oh, by the way, there's all this extra stuff which is now everywhere, and
hmm
you're gonna have to deal with that. And like I think even like you're saying, where from your kind of background and influences, where you're capable of looking at what you have and managing an audience expectation is a really high level skill, which a lot of artists
mm,
just struggle with and continue
mm.
to struggle with. And
Yeah.
I don't know if there's any like coherent advice for it, but
Yeah, I
it's a
mean,
decent topic.
yeah, I mean, I guess if I could like because and maybe it just comes naturally to me. I don't know why it
Mm.
would come naturally to me because I'm not like, I mean, I don't know. I guess marketing is in my family. My dad has a degree in marketing. My sister has a degree in marketing. Maybe it's just in my blood. Um, but I
Just
don't
the
know. I think,
osmosis.
yeah, I mean, obviously, like, experiment is a big thing. Don't just do one thing. Like, see what variation you can bring to what you bring to the table. And then pay attention to the numbers if you're doing it in a social media way. But not so much attention to the numbers that it's affecting your self-esteem because we look at our like counts and it affects our self-esteem and it's just so stupid. It's such bullshit, but we can't help it as people. So there's that. But also like I can't tell you how much I've benefited from just doing in-person events like zine
Yeah.
fairs and comic cons. I enjoy that so much more than trying to like be an attention whore on the internet like that because that's how it feels when I try to like get attention. Like I feel like an attention whore. Um, no, because when I'm at these fairs, I mean, I get to talk to people like one on one in real time and I get to like actually meet these people. And some of the most meaningful like fan relationships I've had. I say that as if I'm like a prominent cartoonist. I'm not a prominent cartoonist yet. We'll see
Would
what happens in the
disagree, but
future,
sure.
but but like I do have like I yeah I don't have like I have like under 2,000 followers on Instagram. Like I'm not a prominent voice in this world in any way. But I do have like with the fans that I do have are often people that I've met in person or I've had like conversations with online. Like I actually have really meaningful relationships with a lot of my fans, and I that is so valuable to me. Like I feel so blessed that I haven't had and I may have this experience at some point, but even if it does happen, I'll be forever grateful that it started this way. That I, started my comics career with having just thriving one-on-one relationships with my fans and being able to talk to them one-on-one about like why they liked my work, what resonated with them, like it's just such a nice thing. And so when those relationships get to start at a Comic Con or a zine fair, I mean that's just so special. And I can remember their faces and I know exactly who they are and it's just really meaningful. But anyway, to get to the point that I was gonna make, I think that you can really gauge like what works with your work way more if you're doing an in-person event than if you're just like watching the numbers climb or not climb online. Because like you get to see people's expressions in real time as they look over your work. I mean, this is how I was able to realize like, okay, so Anacomics is not as like commercial, I guess. I don't really know what other word to use, as my asexual comics. Because I see people like look at the Anacomics and like, I get a lot of positive reactions to Anacomics. I don't want to say that people just don't like it. They do. But people aren't always ready for it, as I said. Yes, yes. Um, and but then when they see the because so I've seen a lot of people look at the Anacomics and it's a lot for them to read at once, like
Mhm. Yeah.
it's not something that you like pick up and just like, sometimes people do. They'll just stand at my table and read a whole thing and I'll be like, great, thanks. They'll be like, oh my God, this made me cry. And I'm like, thanks for actually reading it. But um yeah, but then when they see but a lot of people will see the Anacomics and then they'll just be like, "Oh man, I'm not ready for that right now," or whatever. And then they'll see the asexual stuff and then they'll just open a page, they'll read my one of my 6 panel comics and then they'll be like, "Oh my God, that's so funny." Um, and so I get to see in real time people sort through the things that they're more interested in. And by far, the thing that people are more interested in is the asexual comics. And so that was something I really had to take with me as I decided what I wanted to do for my first book. And
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, I didn't necessarily want to like spill my guts about my sexuality for my first book. But if that's what it takes and I know
Mhm.
I'm helping people while doing it, that definitely makes it better. It's not like I'm just like doing a tell-all for no reason. Like this is actually representation that is very needed. But yeah, I mean that wasn't like my first choice for like my first book. I think in a perfect world for me I probably would have done a more like I don't want to say sophisticated because I think the book I put out is actually pretty sophisticated. But like highly researched blah, 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 not memoir. I would probably do a couple of those first before I was like, okay, so you know the myth, the man, the legend behind these awesome books. Now let's find out more about who I am on the inside. That would have been cool, but that's not that's not what's going on here. People got to learn about my sexuality before they can learn anything else about me. Apparently, that's how it goes for me.
Well, no idea. I feel like you're still in a position where you could do something like that, which is like a TV spot or something, which is just like you've seen this, but have you seen this?
Exactly.
I've got a question for you because I'm kind of curious.
Yeah.
So, I mean, obviously, a lot of the stuff's like memoirs and very like personal stories, slice of life. Do you ever get kind of nervous about being grilled on those topics by like the public at events and whatnot? Because I feel like public events, especially for like artists starting out, are like the scariest thing in the world is that someone's
Mm.
going to ask them about their work, and I'm wondering if you kind of get that.
So, are you asking about being grilled like in a negative way, like people
I mean,
like shitting
I
on me
mean,
or
even
something,
no,
or?
no. I mean, even like positive or negative. Like, I think for a
Mm,
lot of artists, being someone asking, "Hey, what's this about? Is this you?
mm,
Is
mm.
is a huge thing for people." And I'm wondering if you kind of experience.
Oh, interesting. I mean, yeah, I get tons of questions, especially when I'm at these events. I'm pretty much an open book. I'm very happy to answer most questions that I get. Um, I just like talking about art in general. Like I like talking about it. I like I don't want to say that I like talking about myself, but if I have to talk about myself to talk about my art and have these interesting conversations about art, then I will, and that is how it goes for me because a lot of my art is about me. Um, I think the thing that kind of does isn't always great is that because I write about asexuality, I get a lot of like highly personal questions that just like people ask me that I don't necessarily want to answer. And like, here's the thing, I understand I've put myself in a position where I should be expected to like answer these questions. Like, I don't want to dance around it. Like, I'm not saying that anyone who tells people that they're asexual should is asking to be asked those questions, but I'm not just someone who is sharing with someone that I'm asexual. I am someone who is writing about it. So naturally, people feel entitled to ask me really personal questions, and so again, like I don't really feel like I can be too mad about that because of the position I put myself in. But sometimes the questions are not like I have to have some boundaries, and I have a hard time with boundaries sometimes. But like people often ask me because I'm in a relationship. I've been in a relationship for 7 years, and he is not asexual, and so I get a lot of questions about how that works. And that for me is like I'm happy to answer the question in a very baseline way, but because it now involves someone else, I that's like one boundary that I like to put up. Like I don't want to get into the details of as to how that works because it involves someone else. Um, so yeah, like and then there are probably some other questions that I get asked that only have to do with me where I'm just like, oh God, I don't really want to tell the whole world about this right now. Especially because like my memoir that I just finished up is like it is a true like gut spilling book. I really spilled my guts there. So I don't know. So that part isn't great. I mean, there are just some questions where I'm just like, oh man. I don't love being asked that. But and then I guess I mean I don't know. I think there's probably some like internal debates about asexuality that I may become privy to at some point. I haven't really um because any identity based group is going to have there's going to be a lot of discourse, right? So there's obviously plenty of discourse within asexuality, lots of internal disagreement in that community. Um and I haven't really faced a lot of like people like debating me about certain aspects of asexuality. Hasn't really happened to me yet, and it's also just like not necessarily something that I'm not really interested in engaging in asexual discourse, to be honest. Like I am happy to talk about like my experience, and I'm happy to talk to other people about their experiences and answer some basic questions, and hopefully my work can speak for itself. But I think like beyond, I think that I've done what I need to do with this book. I've spilled my guts with this book, and I'm not really interested in becoming like an asexual influencer or anything. I'm just when like this book is the final frontier for me when it comes to asexuality. I'm not going to be like an influencer. So anyway, that's kind of a long-winded answer to that question. But yeah, overall, yeah, I'm not very. I'm not very allergic to sorry, my cat is playing with my cords. Um
What cats are going to
I'm
do.
not very, I know exactly. I'm not allergic to answering questions about my work. Some people might be, but that's just not really a situation that I find myself in. I feel quite happy to talk about my work. So,
I think, I mean, even on topics which aren't asexuality, I think it is a challenge, and it's something which like public places, like even if you take a topic like depression and you publish something
mhm.
which is about depression and you have it on your standard as Zine Fair, the amount of time someone will suddenly dive into their experience with depression and
Oh yeah.
everything they want to tell you about it and all the things which have affected them and then their theories on it. And it's like you say, you have to put up barriers. You have to come down and say, there is a line. What's in the book is what's in the book. Yes, it's me, it's not me, but we can, leave it there. Otherwise,
Yeah. Yeah, and I definitely do like get people who talk to me about their own stories. And honestly, like I'm way more willing to listen to other people talk about their stories than I am to just like completely in person spill my guts. Because again, like I guess I'm happy to spill my guts in a comic form because that's exactly what I've done. But no, I mean if I'm listening to someone like tell me about their experience with asexuality or depression, I also do some comics about my experiences with religion and spirituality. And atheism. And I've heard a lot of deconstruction stories too. And those are three subjects that are very personal, you know. But honestly, like the one thing about me is I just don't really mind that. I don't mind people just like kind of telling me their life stories because I'm a journalist. So I mean, I'm curious. I actually quite like hearing from people. That's kind of what being a journalist is. You have to hear people talk about their lives and you have to be okay with that. And I am very okay with that, but some people might not be. But it's what I signed up for when I decided to be a journalist.
I mean, I was going to say that there's a very high chance, I guess, the fact that you're interested in journalism and study journalism to a level kind of equips you for those situations, right? It kind of equips you for
Totally.
stepping into the public face and being like, well, I know I'm going to be asked a bunch of questions and I know how to ask questions back, which will help this whole
Yes.
situation.
Totally. I there was one there was one experience when I was at Rose City Comic Con here in Portland and this guy came up to my table and he just started rambling and talking really loud. And it got to the point where like my table neighbor, I don't know if you know who Ren Strap is, but she's a
But maybe,
yeah, she just had a book come out actually. She's a very, very talented Portland cartoonist. But she was tabling next to me and she actually just like saw what was happening and came over and asked me to do something for her so that he would go away, but then he didn't go away. Like people were like stepping in, like that's how. But I what Ren did actually kind of caught me off guard because I was like, I guess it didn't occur to me in the moment that what was happening was like disruptive and like weird.
right,
And I think part of that was because one, I've done a lot of customer service stuff. Like I've had a lot of customer service jobs, and so I've dealt with like way weirder than that. And two, I answered the phone at a news station. I've
yeah,
encountered way true. Oh my goodness. Oh my God, can I tell you a story?
sure. That's what we're
This
here
is
for.
a yeah, it's so true, so true. I just this is one of the craziest things that have ever happened to me, and I just feel like sharing it right now. So I when I was at my old station, I was working on a weekend one day, and I answered the phone, and I got this guy who I answered the phone, and he says he was from Vancouver, which is where I live, Vancouver, Washington, and he says a guy died in Vancouver last night, and I did it. And I was like I was like this in my seat and then I like sat up. I was like, yo. So I like started writing down and he just told me everything that I asked him. I asked him what his name was, where it happened, when it happened, what the victim's name was, all this stuff. And I fully expected it to be just like a completely bullshit call because most of the calls I got at that job were bullshit. Like you would be shocked what people will say when they call in a news station. It is bananas. I will probably make some comics about that one day because answering the tip line at a news station, a trip. It is an absolute trip. But anyway, I fully expected that the guy was just like bullshitting me and just like prank calling me. But he answered all of my questions, including I even asked him like how he killed the guy. Like I tried to get as much information as I possibly could, and I asked him like if the police knew, and he said that they did, but they let him go. And I was like, this is why I thought it was bullshit. I was like, what do you mean they let you go? You killed a guy allegedly. And then when I found a non-emergency number for the police, and so I called them, and they, to my great surprise, told me that it was a real case. And yeah, I got a call back from like the sheriff or someone, and he like told me like what had happened, and that the guys, like these two men, had gotten into an altercation, and they had determined that the guy like killed the other guy in self-defense. But like that's the kind of stuff that I have like encountered in my professional life. So when a guy comes up to my comic table, my table at a Comic Con, and starts talking really loud about weird stuff, it doesn't really faze me. I'm not gonna lie, it doesn't faze me because I literally talked to a guy who killed another guy on the phone one time.
You have fully battled hardened for creative comebacks and criticism by this world of just like, yeah, there's been way worse situation.
Absolutely. And as I get into this new job, I'm going to be doing the same stuff. So I'm not afraid of anything. Not afraid of anything anymore.
This is like a weird promotional material for future artists to be like, you know what you guys should do before you make artwork? You should go answer phones at a news station because then nothing anyone ever says to you will register.
Well, that actually, no, that actually kind of brings me to something that I was hoping I would get to talk about on here. I am of the great belief that artists should not just be artists. So the art school that I went to, University of North Carolina School of the Arts, I would not have chosen to go there if they did not have a liberal arts requirement for graduation. They had like you had to take a certain amount of math, science, history, whatever credits in order to graduate. A lot of art schools don't do that. A lot of art schools that give out BFAs don't do that. You only take arts classes. But it was that was kind of a deal breaker for me. I was like, I would like to go to a college that will teach me some stuff that isn't related to art. Because I've just always been of the belief like if you don't engage with things outside of art making, what are you going to make art about? You know? And yeah, like so what I think I hope I feel like people might be like disappointed that I'm going back into full-time work in journalism after like 2 years of like a pretty successful run with doing comics all like full-time, even though I'm not going to stop comics anytime soon. But I over these past 2 years, I have found myself feeling really unfulfilled outside of like my art making practice because like I feel like I'm just like losing connection with the rest of the world. Like I'm just sitting in my apartment like doing my drawings and my comics, but I'm not engaging with the world the way I was when I had a full-time job and I was answering phones at a news station. And so I'm actually so looking forward to feeling like to going into the city and going into the skyscraper where I'm going to be working and answering my little phones and talking to people about weird stuff, talking to like right-wing nut jobs and also talking to left-wing nut jobs, like talking to people of all walks of life, just everywhere. I just think it's so important to have an experience like that under your belt if you're going to be an artist. If art is all you live and breathe, like I'm inclined to predict that your art is not going to be that interesting, you know? And that's just kind of how I see it. So I really am looking forward to, maybe I'll talk to another murderer on the phone. We'll see. Like I don't want to call him a murderer because he was not charged with murder, just saying, but like maybe I'll talk to some other like maybe more people will call me from prison. Maybe more people will write letters from prison that I get to read. Like that also happened. Just there's so many interesting experiences. And I'm so thankful that I get to do that again.
Well, I think that's interesting as well because I think I've always had the long-standing theory of especially for kind of people who grew up from working class backgrounds or whatever of where you get a little bit of art as a kid when
Mm,
when you like starting out and then obviously you pick a job to go make money to survive essentially. So you
Hmm.
kind of do that, and you it gets hammered out of you that art can be any part of your culture or any kind of that. And I always say to people who I do meet who are in full time jobs in anything that you should have some level of art within your life, right? Some level
Hmm.
of
Yeah.
creativity, some way to express yourself. Because if you don't, you're not engaging with your full self, firstly, but also
Hmm.
you're kind of killing off a part of your brain. You're
Hmm.
slipping into that gap of just being kind of the automaton of just like I'm going to go to the office, I'm going to do this, and that's it, and then I go home, and then I eat, and I go to sleep, and that kind of come. So it's interesting to think of it from the other perspective of
Yeah, yeah. I think both
being an
things are true.
artist. Yeah, I think it's balanced because like you say, I think you risk that level of self-flagellation within your own art where you're just like, I'm in the art world, never be questioned. I can do all the things I want to do in my artwork
Yes, exactly, exactly. I mean,
without
I
constant
think,
criticism. Yeah.
yeah, I think
Any,
that any hobby really like counts for that too. Like,
yeah.
um, even like doing a sport, I think counts as that. Like, because doing a sport like that is a skill, and like doing like having being highly skilled in a sport that is in a way like an art. You because it's something that you have to harness, and because like I've gotten really into soccer lately. I'm as if I'm someone from from your neck of the woods. I know people from the UK very into football, um, but
Well, I don't engage with it.
well, I happen to live in Soccer City, USA, Portland, Oregon. Very, very into soccer over here, so I have inevitably gotten into it. But like I like a few weeks ago. Santiago Moreno, man, he pulled off one of the coolest goals ever. Although I haven't been a soccer fan for very long, but I thought it was really cool. And like the level of artistry you have to have when it
Mm,
comes to footwork and things like that to be able to accomplish a goal like that, you know? I mean, that to me is also an art or like, yeah, I don't know. Anything that puts you in a flow state, I think, really counts for just like having some sort of art form, some sort of artistry that enriches your life. So yeah, I think that you need art to enrich your life in some capacity, but I think you also need to have like some connection to the world in order to enrich your life too, especially if you are a storyteller, like that. Yeah, I just like I said before, I don't know how interesting your life your art is going to be if your life isn't enriched by experiences and people,
mm.
and stepping outside of your comfort zone when it comes to people, diversifying your social group or like your day-to-day life, trying new things, that kind of thing. Yeah.
I think a comment or phrase used a while back was every so often you need to choose the hostile audience. You need to choose the audience who's not full of friends and people who are going to agree with you. You need to,
Mm.
drop your artwork into some space where you're like, this might not be for everybody, and just see what happens. Because yeah,
Oh
like I say,
yeah.
it improves everything in terms of like what you're doing because it shakes you out of that space. I guess
Totally.
in
Yeah,
your mind.
yeah, I'm gonna totally promote my book with Turning Point USA. That'll go over really well. I know that's not what you're saying, but
I
just gonna go
mean,
to a
maybe that's
Charlie
what they
Kirk
need.
event. Honestly.
Like there's a comment I used the other day. A friend of mine, we were discussing airport lounges,
Uh-huh.
and how like you privileged travelers who get that airport lounge because they have the special things. And I was like,
Oh yeah.
I like the idea of just going into spaces I know I shouldn't be in because I look how I look, and just making people uncomfortable because every so often they
Hmm.
need to be made a little bit uncomfortable.
Yeah, I agree. I agree
Walk
with
through
that
the fancy
sentiment.
neighborhood. They're too comfortable in the house.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, and like some of us just like have had very average lives too, you know? Like, people who have had like very extraordinary lives are very blessed. Like ha people who have had extraordinary lives just because that's how it turned out, like they were lucky, like they had very interesting parents or they grew up in a very interesting place or something. Those people are very lucky because that will inevitably inform their art. But a lot of us have like very average lives, and so I think that people who've had like very average, like very unremarkable like upbringings and stuff like that, I feel like those are the people who especially should be like making the effort to just do some stuff that is unrelated to art, you know?
Yeah, just take that risk. Get out of the view of everything which and make something more interesting.
Absolutely.
If I have to hear one more love song about someone they knew from high school, I'm going to cry.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Very few original. Although I will say something that I realized recently was actually I realized this when I saw Hadestown, the musical Hadestown.
Yeah.
There's like a whole thing at the end where they comment on the fact that we tell the same stories over and over, which is exactly what Hadestown is. Like we've heard the story over and over, and it kind of addresses the question of like why do we return to this over and over? And it's yeah, I don't know. It made me think a lot about how we really do. Even the most original stories are really just touching upon the same universal themes. You know what I mean? Um, so yeah, I mean, yeah, we do get a lot of the same like bullshit as you were saying. And that gets irritating after a while for sure. But I also like am also open to just like different artists doing the same like sort of thing and doing it in their own way. So I mean, yeah, there's only so much that we can do within this universe. It takes a very rare person to have like a completely
Yeah.
original concept.
I do agree with that as well. I mean, I recently had a conversation about the film Sinners. Have you seen the film Sinners?
Oh God, I need to. I haven't been to the movies a lot lately. But that's one thing that I really should go see before it leaves. Yeah.
I won't ruin it for you, but it was kind of like a comment which a friend made and was like, "Oh, yeah, it's really similar to this film." And
Mm,
in my head, I hadn't put it next to that film at all, and I
mm,
went, "That's really good." But that's what they hated about it. They were like, "Oh, no, it's too alike to this other film," and I was like, "No, because I watched it and I didn't even make the connection, and I
mm.
like that film, and that's good. That's the impressive thing. They told the same story again, but in a slightly different way, and therefore." That's what we did. Just,
Totally.
change the
I
card progression
saw
once.
I saw an amazing film yesterday. It's
Oh,
called The Ballad of Wallace Island. Um, and it's an English film. And it has Carey Mulligan in it, which is a big draw for me. I love Carey Mulligan. I will watch anything that she's in. But it's not it did really well at Sundance apparently. It was at South by Southwest. But it's about like a man who is like he's a widow and he lives alone. He's won the lottery, so he has a lot of money, but he lives alone on this island and he's lost his wife and he has invited his favorite like folk duo that he and his wife love to do like a personal performance for him for like a great deal of money because he has a great deal of money.
is this the one with
Um,
Tim Key in it?
yes, it is.
I saw the trailer
Yes.
for it and I was like, this looks good.
It's so I cried a lot. You should definitely
Yeah,
go see it. Yeah.
I'll have to
It
check that
reminded
out.
me of a John Carney movie. I don't know if you've seen a
Okay.
lot of like Sing Street, Once,
Yeah.
Begin Again. I really like John Carney movies. It reminded me a lot of a John Carney movie, and I actually like while I was watching it, I was like, I can't believe this is not directed by John Carney. This is so John Carney coded. Because it's that human story that revolves around love of music. That's kind of his whole thing. But it was not a John Carney movie, but I have a feeling the director of that movie took a lot of inspiration from the work of John Carney for sure, for sure.
And there you are again. Once again, connecting with the human stories. This is
Exactly.
the thing you do. Well, I think this brings us around to a nice rounding out point of
I think so
discussing
too.
art and all things. I do have a couple of questions to round this out with, though. This has been
Yeah,
lovely.
totally.
They're pretty straightforward questions, and hopefully won't stump you with them, but I don't think I will. So, unrelated to necessarily anything, art, life, whatever you want to talk about, I want to know what a truly great piece of advice is.
A truly great piece of advice is, man, if I hadn't already talked about this, I would have said like diversify your life to make your art better. But because that is a piece of advice I like to give
It's
to
a great
people.
piece of
But
advice.
oh man, let me think about that for a second. Huh. Oh, okay. Actually, okay, I have one. So this is actually a piece of advice that I got from one of my favorite professors when I was in grad school. Shout out
Mm.
to Benjamin Davis. Um, he uh, he taught my broadcast class, and um, he had us all like create news packages for the class, and we all had to come up with like a beat. So whatever kind of topic we were trying to cover. So I picked like internet stuff because I think internet stuff is very interesting, and I like doing stories about tech and the internet. But But some people, that was pretty easy for me to figure out, but some people were kind of stumped as to what beat they wanted to do. And so he told us that if you're struggling to figure out what beat you want to do, think about what you were really interested in when you were a kid. And I think that that is such an interesting piece of advice because to bring this conversation full circle, as I was talking about at the beginning, one of my first very deep interests was comics. And so, if I could take myself back to like when I was like 23 before I really figured out the comic stuff, I if I had told myself to think about like what my original loves were, and like yeah, I would have thought about comics. So I guess the way to phrase that piece of advice would be like, if you're struggling to find out like your interests, your purpose in life, think about what really interested you when you were really young. Because when you were really young, you did not have like all that like societal bullshit kind of clouding your vision about like what you should do. You were thinking about what you naturally gravitated towards. And so I think for a lot of us, thinking about what we were really into when we were really young can really give us a fuller picture of ourselves and what we may feel most productive, most fulfilled doing with our lives. So, yeah.
I like that. I like that. I feel like it's very good advice as well. Yeah. Simple, straightforward, and
Yeah.
does the job. Just hopefully you can remember your childhood. Maybe don't think back that far if you can.
Mm.
My final question of the day. Obviously, I found you through various online means, but what I like to do is also just ask, who should I speak to next? Who
Who
would you
should you
like to see?
speak to next?
Yeah.
Oh boy. Let me think about that. I have a few. Okay,
It's a broader
I
question.
have like maybe a few people in mind, but I feel like I probably shouldn't name drop them. I can, I
You
can
can name drop
set.
them offline,
I
and
will
then
name
yeah,
drop them offline once I think of like a good list.
that's the first time anyone's had to do that, but that's fine.
Really? Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I just like don't want to name drop people without their permission, I suppose.
No, people usually go one way or another. It's either like, "Oh, my friend, you should speak to them. They do amazing things," or they pick someone like so far in like the pie in the sky pile of just like, "You should contact this celebrity," and I'm like,
You
"Whatever,
should talk to
I don't care."
Taylor Swift. You should talk to Taylor Swift. Yeah.
I feel like that'd be the one way my podcast would get big. I'm closely connected. I've got you. You're a Swifty. I can,
I am a
you
Swiftie.
know, we
Proud
can.
Swiftie.
Never, I'll drop an email. I don't care. But no, that'd be great. But it's been lovely to catch up with you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hopefully, it's not been too painful or
No,
anything.
it's been a good talk. I feel like I rambled, but you know.
We all do. I mean, I do
Yes.
solo podcasts as well, where it's basically just me rambling. So it's nice to have the balance and get other
Totally.
opinions and the outside world in on every once in a while. Yeah.
Totally.
It has been lovely. People should check out your work, and whenever your book comes out, they should buy it.
They
Throw
should.
that in.
Yep. Ace of Hearts. It's
It's
coming
fine.
to a books bookstore near you.
We were doing so well until the
I
final step.
know.
But on that note, we will talk to these kids later. Thanks for coming.